Hello, friends. Welcome to the Tell It Like It Is podcast. I'm your host, Alexi Bailey, and I have a very special guest today, Charmaine.
Hey.
Charmaine, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
Charmaine, I started seeing your work on Instagram and I followed your accounts and see what you've been doing. And you have a podcast called Culture Shock.
Yeah, the culture shock abroad. Mm-hmm.
Um, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so essentially, well, first of all, the podcast was initially called the Culture Shock with Charm. You start something, you don't have to be perfect, but I didn't want to get stuck on the name. I wasn't in love with the name, but I'm like, I'm gonna start a podcast because it's just on my heart. So, my friends encouraged me. At first, the podcast was really just to help me like document my travels and, help people kind of understand what it's like to travel abroad using a Jamaican passport at the time, and just finding different pieces of the culture in different places I went. So it really started like that. And then kind of like helping people like, how do you save to travel? Where do you go to buy tickets and stuff like that? And then the pandemic hit and it turned into more introspective discussions, more discussions about, how we're surviving as a culture, how we're surviving as a people with the pandemic, and just deeper conversations. And I think that is something that has been very common across the board. With people just really trying to connect in different ways. So I changed the name to the Culture Shock Abroad, and it's really to kind of dive into issues that Jamaicans in the diaspora, people who are married to Jamaicans, who have Jamaican parents, who have Jamaican friends, can kind of connect, having like a common common voice or a unified concern about the state of Jamaica. And also like I wanted that space to talk about what you go through when you move to the States or move abroad. And, a lot of people don't really have a space to talk about that. There's a lot of blogs about gossip and stuff like that, but there isn't a lot of space to just connect people and chat about like real things that are affecting people once they move abroad. So that's how it's kind of evolving. And now I'm in like a space where I'm really just trying to make sure the brand going forward is something that has longevity. So I took a little step back just to make sure I'm having the right planning, and just making sure my vision is executed well, because I'm really before the interview started, I was fussing about the audio quality. I'm super, conscious of how the brand reach goes. And it's not just me, it's just how I'm able to reach. So that's long and short of the culture shock abroad and me.
So you usually start with the where in Jamaica you from?
Yes, I do. I like asking that question because it helps the audience to connect with the guests.
So where are you
So
from?
I'm from Manchester. Um, so a lot of people, when they're like, "Where in Jamaica you're from?" We always hear Kingston. I don't hear a lot of Manchester people represented. So yeah, I'm from Manchester, born and raised. So yeah.
So my whole family is from St. Mary. My mother and
Okay.
father, they met up in the bushes.
Uh
Um, and at some point they transitioned to Kingston. The relationship continued. So I was born in Kingston, but they always, every weekend I was going back to, in St. Mary's Highgate. I don't know if you know.
okay, yeah. I know Highgate.
Yeah. So a lot of what I wanted to talk to you, I came here when I was 13 years old. That was 1994. And the biggest question I always get is what happened to your accent?
Yeah. Hmm. I mean, yeah. So I always say, like, I think Jamaicans code switch. We will meet another Jamaican, and it's like almost immediately your accent changes. And I think it's not unique to Jamaica. I
Sure.
think like different cultures do it. Like Hispanic Americans do it. Like when they see somebody else in Spanish, they're like they go into full Spanish and it's full their dialect from their country. Like the Cubans do it. So I don't think it's unique, but it's always funny. When I'm on the phone at work, like obviously I have a work voice, that's what I call it. And it's really just for people to not ask me to repeat myself so many times. That's how my voice just evolved into like this neutral American sound, which is kind of crazy. But sometimes it's like, well, I've been here now, I'm gonna say 15 years. So my voice just kind of, if I meet another Jamaican, it's yeah man, wagwan, what you say, what we are doing, you know? And then it's code switching. It really is.
Um, Jamaica has such a unique history and a unique position in the culture, right? In the broader, Western culture, And to be honest with you, a lot of things, as a Jamaican, I had to find out later. It wasn't explained to me. It was later on, I just said, let me figure out what is this Rastafarianism? What is the roots of reggae and Bob Marley and these things? When you're born in it, you just live it every day and no one explains it to you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, we are. I think there's a lot. I'm gonna actually take my glasses off because I'm getting a glare. Sorry, I can still see you. I'm getting a glare. I'm so crazy about it. But you're right. I feel like because I've always like spoken about. So the education system in Jamaica is great. I'll never bash it because I feel like when you stack it up against other countries, our education system was really good. Um, it was a very like principled system, like not you're kind of like learning discipline and manners and values in addition to academics, right? Like certain schools you can't wear your hair a certain way, you got to wear your socks off with this, your shoes have, your skirt can't too short, like it's very like colonial principle. That's another story, but um there's a lot of gaps in our education. So there's a lot that, and then especially for you, you mentioned you left. When I feel like now, like first generation children now, they're actually, or kids who left when they were younger, the way how social media space is set up now, it's so much easier for them to learn different things. When you left in the 90s, I mean, there was really not a lot of connection to Jamaica outside of the occasional phone call or when you visit, or if somebody wrote you, you didn't know what was happening. Like you didn't get the Gleaner issue every day. You didn't open social media and you know what's happening in Mobay before people in Mobay know. So growing up for people back then, and you come to this, you kind of lose the connection naturally because of it's just not there. You're assimilating to a new culture now. So you're not really getting the information as you should. And if you're, your household, your parents are probably like working, like, yo, I need to put food on the table, like I would love to teach you all these things, but I got two jobs, you know what I mean? So I feel like now is when a lot of people are like, oh crap, I didn't know anything about this, and I had no idea that Jamaica was involved in that, and I didn't know our prime minister was that. And so that's why it's important to have these spaces where it's not just gossip, and it's like you can learn something, and we can talk about things that you probably did not have visibility to when you were growing up.
Exactly. So, I think I'm not your average Jamaican because I'm very much intellectual, and I code switch a little bit too well. I'm able to play all the cards and check all the boxes and things like that. So the average person would say, "Oh, I didn't know you were Jamaican," that kind of thing. And it's always a thing for me.
Okay.
There's a lot of political things that that I have gotten a lot of awareness on over time. Um, things like the IMF and owing money and how that affects the country's decisions and these kinds of things. Can you say a little bit about that?
Well, so I kind of if you've watched my lives, I dive into a little bit of how the political structure in the 80s kind of um it was, well, it kind of preceded the 80s, but I like to speak about the 1980s election, but it kind of like shaped the landscape of what Jamaica looks like today. Um, there's a lot of classified, or well, unclassified CIA documents. I spoke about this before, about Jamaica that people don't necessarily talk about or know about. And there's a reason for that. There's a lot of Jamaican political history that will not be told in a way that people will accept, because it's still partisan. It's still PNP, JLP. It's been that way since we were we were raised in it, and it continues, right? So there's a lot of political history that will not be told in a way that people will receive it, and people will just naturally have a bias. There are a lot of people who are neutral and just want to know the history, but the IMF and having Jamaica kind of indebted, am I saying that right? Kind of also shape how we were able to progress. And it wasn't just the deals made with the IMF for these loans, it was the series of events after that. It was the financial collapse of the 90s, where, if you've ever heard of FinSac, that story is one story that needs to be told. I don't know if anyone is going to tell that story, because there's so many layers to it. And I don't know if anyone really, I think we'll probably have to rely on the elders of that time to give us that information. But last year, one of the stalwarts of that period, Paul Chen Young, he actually ran Eagle Bank, who was a part of the collapse of the 90s. So really what happened, it was bad debts, bad financial decisions, and just lack of regulation is how I perceive that was happening. A lot of people were just making high risks investments, and there was just not a lot of regulation around it, and it really
let's slow it down a little bit, right? The International Monetary Fund.
Yeah.
They give loans to smaller countries who are in debt, or large countries, anyone who meets their requirements to get money. But the story is, when they give you this money, it comes with a lot of strings attached. So it's not just, here's money for a bridge, here's money for schools. It's, okay, we'll give you this money if you do this, if you do that, if you stop saying this, if you stop supporting these certain ideas, right? So it was things like this.
Yeah. And a lot of the IMF deals is something that we would probably not know.
Right. It's hush hush, off the books. It says one thing on paper, but the reality is it's something else.
Yeah. So we're really indebted, and we don't even know the extent to the debt sometimes, like what was discussed, what was agreed on. And then we have people who benefited from that. You have to think about it. Like, even if the country on a whole did not benefit, there were people who benefited from these deals. So
a lot of these things. So here's the thing for me, right? Being new to these things, I grew up knowing that something wasn't right? Mm-hmm. Seeing a lot of poor people, seeing the system not saying they don't have money for this, they don't have money for that. And, all I know is the system's not working, right? And everybody, it's common sense. You shouldn't have potholes everywhere. You should have roads. You should have, the things that you should have. So I always saw that obvious gap. And then you start to hear corruption. This police captain, this politician, someone stole money. This money is now gone. And I think we all hear it across the board, wherever, whatever country you're from, you've heard this in some way, shape, or form. So as you listen more and more, you start to hear about political violence, right? Politicians paying one group of people to go and start a war with another group of people so that these people will be afraid to go out and vote so you can win the election, these kinds of things. So the interesting thing to me is that these things are not common, these things are happening all over the world. Mm-hmm. This is stuff that they use to keep poor people abused and out of power, right? These things are very much normalized.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But somehow Jamaica stands out, Mm-hmm. We know that Haiti was one of the first republics, so they stand out for that. We stand out because we just always shining somehow.
Yes. I think Jamaica has and I hate saying this, I don't want Jamaica's luck to run out. And the reason why I say that is because we have a very unique value that we bring to the world that not a lot of other countries do. And Haiti is a beautiful country. The scale of corruption that happened with Haiti is a little more terrible, I would say, than Jamaica. I mean, Haiti was indebted up to 1947 to France. When they finally paid off their debt, which is ridiculous. They had to pay a debt to be free. So when you think about that, they had that debt that they were paying off. And of course, there were Haitians who benefited from that too. When we think about it, we think it's everybody, but there were people who were involved in that deal, So Jamaica was unique because we have a culture that is so strong. It is so known. It is sought after. Jamaica is a natural marketing powerhouse. The name, the colors, the name, the cultural influence is what keeps Jamaica alive, I think. It's what keeps the tourists coming. I mean, there's so many other places they could go. I mean, there is a ton of islands that they can go. There's Bahamas. There's so many places. When they come to Jamaica, there could be 10 million wars happening in Tivoli. There will be 2 tourists on the beach in the grill,
minding their business,
in their bikini, minding their business. So there's something powerful about the culture that keeps people interested in Jamaica and keeps that pipeline moving. So I think even though there is, the corruption and there's a ton of other things happening, we will always benefit from being Jamaica, and we'll always benefit from the people who were bold enough to put Jamaica on the map, which is, the Marcus Garveys. I don't think people really understand how big Marcus Garvey was and how influential he was even in the American pre-civil rights movement. And then there's Bob, of course, who was just Bob. I don't think Bob even realized what he was doing. He was making music. And there's so many other people after that just kept taking the baton. It's just, who's next? There's bold. It's every generation, there's somebody to be proud of. And that person, it's almost as if they understand, as the kids will say, they understand their assignment. They know what they're carrying on their backs and they represent us well. So we've just had that luxury. And I keep saying, I don't want the luck to run out where we get to the point where people are I'm not going to that place, or, I just don't want to. And I feel that's why I get so spirited if you've seen my stories, sometimes I just blow up and start cuss people off because I'm like, what the hell is happening in Jamaica? Because you guys don't understand that you have to fix or try to fix it for the next generation. You cannot keep kick as the Barbadian Prime Minister said um this week. She says you can't keep kicking the bottle down the street like it's somebody else's problem, you know? So if we're not fixing some of the root causes, which there are plenty, um I'm afraid that we'll get to that point where we'll look run out. You know, like nobody wants to come here anymore, and nobody wants to, you know, associate with. I just don't want it to get to that point, and I want us to just hold the people accountable that needs to be. No, and I feel like no, when eyes are on the world, all the world's eyes is on Jamaica with what's next, who is coming. We need to be a little bit more cognizant of that.
It's a very big topic. You know, there's so many. I'm gonna just generalize third world countries that never recovered from their colonization and all of the issues that stem from that that's still carrying through. Jamaica, like most of the Caribbean, most of South America, is not any different. But again, we continue to stand out.
Yeah.
Have you seen the new 007 movie?
I have not. I have not. I heard I need to. I have
Well,
not yet.
well, there's no spoilers given tonight, but I tell you, guess where they found him? Guess where he was hanging out?
Oh, in Jamaica
In
somewhere?
Jamaica. So you know, the music's playing, he's drinking a Heineken, like, you know, so Jamaica's still getting those mentions, still
Yeah.
still leading the Caribbean, still like, you know, there's something there, you know, that I don't know. I can't even say it. I feel it in my veins, but I can't tell you in words what it is.
Yeah. And the funny thing is the thing is we have so many things we can market. We just don't know where to touch because James Bond, like Errol Flynn actually wrote some of the James Bond books in Aracabesa. So these are things that a lot of people don't know. Like they probably see it now, but it's like there's a history behind James Bond being there. Like I think James Bond Beach was named for that. So there's so much like, and I think it's the culture. Um, the culture kind of dictates how people feel about a place, right? Like there's some countries that you will never hear about. No disrespect. It's probably beautiful there. The people are probably amazing, but the culture does not translate with everyone.
I mean, if you ask me, you know, you mentioned the two names. It's Marcus Garvey and Bob Marley. And a lot of people may not necessarily understand the impact they had individually. But a lot of this, you know, pro-Black got its energy coming out of Jamaica. So I'm not saying we started it, but you know,
Yeah.
all of the R&B stuff that was happening in America, we took that, made our spin, and somehow the whole world had to take notice.
Yes. And I mean, we have to fight with our American brothers and sisters about this, that the father of hip hop was
A
the
Jamaican,
father of hip hop was a Jamaican. I mean, they won't take it. They will not take it. They're not gonna take that at all. They're not
well,
gonna
you
take
know, he was living in the Bronx, and
exactly.
all of whatever was in his veins was resonating with the music he heard, and he just started on his turntables. Turntables already existed, he just put it together in a unique way. And you know, also we had the musical culture of Jamaica, so he had different things, different experiences than everyone else, and he advanced the culture, you know.
He did.
You cannot deny that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so The culture is what keeps us alive. It really keeps the country alive. It keeps us trending. It's and of course sports. Um
I have to pause for 90s dancehall.
90s dancehall.
90s dancehall. In my opinion, something took place in that 90s dancehall that I don't think has ever happened since then in music.
Yeah.
It
I think
really stands out to me.
no, at 90s dancehall is probably like everyone's favorite. I think what it was, and I mean, I'm not like a music historian by any means. I mean, but I and of course it preceded that. It was the 80s and it was, the evolution of the sound box and all of that stuff. But um what I think the 90s music was, it was about unity on a rhythm, like that. I think that it was like the craftsmanship that went into creating a rhythm. It was like art. Like now, you have so many ways to create beats. um but the beats they sound different. The dancehall now has more of a trap or R&B feel to it. It's more singing, it's more, soulful with a little trap. It's different. But back then it was like beat. It was like, every beat meant something. And the producers like took it very seriously. Not that these producers do not, but they really took the art of making a beat, they really took it to heart. So every single beat, like now I remember having a whole 2-hour MP3 player with just instrumentals. I would just sit and listen to all the instrumentals from the 90s. um and then everybody was on the beat. Like all your favorites was on the beat. So you could get one cassette, I'm telling my age, and it would have everybody on it. It would have.
But you see, I think that's another thing that music did, as far as I know, never had. Imagine you have 40 to 50 of the best musicians all on the same track. Like, where else does that happen?
That was the best thing, because you didn't have to choose the song. Like the song just kept coming on the same rhythm and you just hearing like hit after hit, and it was and the thing is, I feel like now I don't know how, if they write songs for artists or they write beats for artists, I'm sorry, but I think back then the producers probably wrote the song and they're like, anybody who can hop on this and give me a tune, that's it. And people just wanted to like really make a statement, because if Beanie Man dep on it, me not go flop. So that's what I think the 90s was. And then after that, it just kind of faded out. And then you had like fractions and this side and that side. And it just got a little different. But yeah, I think 90s dancehall it's legendary for that reason. And there were so many artists. I think I still don't know all the artists that were singing, because sometimes you would hear some rhythm and the song sound good and you're like, who that's even now? You're like, I don't even know who that was, but the song was good. So yeah.
Music played a big part of my Jamaican identity. I grew up very Christian conservative, Seventh-day Adventist. What religion was your family in Jamaica?
Methodist. It was like kind of Anglican.
Yeah. So how old were you when you came here?
I was in my 20s. Because I went to college in Jamaica.
Which high school did you go to?
I went to the Carteret College, and then I went to Manchester High, and then I went to University of Technology. So I went through the school system all the way to college there.
I mean, listen, there's so much of Jamaica for me that felt like if I want to say, JC or, Arden, all these schools, they were just like larger than life. It was just, it meant so much to me back then that now, you know, I don't think we can explain it. These schools are like legends.
Yeah. And that's why I think that's what, I'm glad you said that, because I was explaining to somebody here, like high schools in Jamaica is a different ball game. And I'm sure like the single sex schools, I think the way they were able to just execute that, like the Hamptons, the Monroes, the Westwoods, the legendary, as you said, legendary schools, they were just able to just focus on this is what we're going to be amazing at. And some of these schools, I mean, you're absolutely right. The way they were able to just excel in academics, sports, you know, so many of their past students went on to do amazing things across the world just from just like the structure at these schools and the amazing principals throughout the years that they've had. But the high school experience in Jamaica for me was, it was unmatched because, and I obviously I'm biased, but there, yes, the education system was good. Yes, we had some colonial influence, and yes, certain things should have been better. But if you didn't come from a home that was providing you with guidance, you got that in school. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I don't know how things have changed since, but you got those principles there. Like, this is, you're going to learn respect. You are going to understand discipline. That was laid down and people followed. And, you know, you were able to, you make amazing friends and things. But I think like the principled side of it, understanding that is something that was kind of like the core of the Jamaican school, the Jamaican education as far as high school for me.
I was talking recently about that the contest that would come on between the schools.
Oh, I was on that.
What did they call it? Remind me the name.
Schools challenge quiz.
This was a big deal. This was a Jamaican game show, and like you were there tuned in. Even if you didn't go to that school, you were there like just watching this thing. It was a big deal in Jamaica.
Yeah.
It was like the Olympics.
It was, I think that time it was weekly. My school had gone there for the first time because my school is a smaller school and the smaller schools in Jamaica. And I remember we had a team, and it was actually crazy because my experience going, so we trained for like a year, and it's like after school you're sitting and you're studying these questions, but they're good because they're also helping you with your exams. It's not like, you know, a bad thing.
These are like Jeopardy questions.
Yeah, it's really like Jeopardy questions.
Asking them to high school kids, and it gets really competitive because you know the top schools in the country and you want to say, I beat that school.
Yeah. And you're like 15, 16, between 15 and 18. That's the age range. So, you know, you're still a kid. But yeah, we got in a bus. It was live. A lot of people didn't think it was live because they were calling my parents. And it was live, and you got on a bus, you drove into Kingston, and you get into the studio, they powder your face. I'm like, what is happening? The lights come on, and at that time for a small island country child. So yeah, and those things were what kept like the country's energy always focused on like school and healthy competition, and then champs.
Right.
And then there's schoolboy football. There's the Costa Cup. There's Manning Cup. That's like, I don't know what you would.
We have to go back to champs. You have to go back to champs, because champs is the other thing that's like the international Olympics between Jamaicans.
Right. This is why that's why you have to explain that when people ask, like, why are Jamaicans so fast? We've been running since basic school. Like, this is not, it's like, we've been doing this all our lives. So
we have like more gold medals than a lot of these countries.
Right.
You know,
and then people try to paint it as, you know, obviously you're doping or something like that. But I think if somebody actually watches champs or attends it, they'll understand. Like, these kids are training all year.
So, so to give it an American perspective, this would be like the pen relays.
Yes,
And
it would be, yeah.
this is like the pen relay level of excitement for high school kids.
I wouldn't even equate it to the pen relays. I would equate it to like March Madness or like high school or college basketball or something like,
Exactly.
yeah. It's that level of like every school, and if your school is not a part of it, you jump on a wagon for some other school. And the level of competition that you see, like the good thing about it is that you can spot the stars early. So when I saw Asafa, like obviously run for the first time, like obviously he was running in champs, and he wasn't like a superstar, but he something about Asafa in champs and Bolt, when you saw them, you're like,
you knew.
yeah. you know, just a little more discipline or training. These guys, they got it. And there were so many other kids like that. So many other kids like that that went on to be Olympians or like, top collegiates, athletes. So yeah, you'd have to see it to understand.
What kind of issues are you most passionate about? I mean, I do get a strong sense that Jamaica is dear to your heart. You know, you're here in America now. I want to talk to you about your traveling. What is it about Jamaica that you're very passionate about these days?
I have two passions, and I think people who know me know that I'm super vocal about both. That I so much that I had to create two separate brands for it. One is obviously um Jamaica. Like, I can't separate myself from Jamaica. I can't speak of who I am. I can't tell you anything about me unless I mention where I'm from. And it's not the same for everyone, but I can't. And the reason why is it literally made me who I am. So I'm passionate about the country. I'm passionate about education. Um because I feel like um although we have a good education system, um the level of education that we should be providing is not always accessible to everyone. And that is lack of resources. We don't pay our teachers well. Not all schools have the resources to provide certain things to aid their children. And now with COVID, it's like um it's very difficult for even connectivity or staying on. So I'm really passionate about the education side. I feel like a lot of the problems with Jamaica can be assisted with like a very a strong focus on having children not only do the academic route, but also helping them into craftsmanship and still having the tools to like run a business, or still having the educational background enough to like make good investments, how to start a business, like stuff like that. Not only push your child, because I feel like our education system did that, push your child to this route, like you have to go into this route, you have to, but you're missing so many great entrepreneurs. So many children missed out. So my passion is to bring some sort of assistance where that is concerned. So last year when the pandemic hit, I did a drive to get tablets to Jamaica when nobody could find tablets. So we rallied around and I sent tablets to my alma mater. Next year, I'm in the process now of starting a nonprofit, and this is going to be specifically for children in Jamaica that do STEM. So it's science and technology, engineering, and maths, because that's kind of my background. And I want to be able to pay for CXCs for some of these children who their family can't afford it. So I want to be able to like not make money be a problem for a child who really wants to learn. Um, because education opens so many doors and opportunities. And I know that access to education right now is, I think the numbers that we're seeing is, I think Lisa Hanna posted that there was 120,000 children that were unaccounted for in the schools.
Mm.
I think since the pandemic, they haven't been able to log into classes, or
Wow.
that is a huge number. And if they are not educated and they don't have the avenues for entrepreneurship, and there's no skills training readily available, what's going to happen 5, 10 years down the line?
Mm.
So that is one passion. My second passion, which I kind of branched off on my Charm Travels page, is really travel, and traveling in the sense that I really want people to prioritize seeing the world before it's too late. And when I say too late, I mean, don't wait for retirement. Um, don't wait for everything to align. Go out there and see the world. Um, and I want people to see me and understand that you can actually do it too. You don't need to have unlimited resources. But just being able to prioritize and make small changes in your life, in your budget, in your priorities, for you to be able to. I want to see families like Caribbean families, Jamaican families taking their children to Paris, or taking their child to the continent, to Africa, going back to so creating that um inspiration and resources to have people know that they can actually see the world. And it's important for Black people to do that too, because although we're immigrants, so we're natural travelers, um, we travel to a few places. Like, we're coming to the US, or you go England, or you go Canada, but there's so much more to see. Um, and I that's kind of my passion, is to really show people that you can see the world, and it just changes your perspective. It makes you a little bit more confident in your space, because you kind of see where you fit in the grand puzzle of everything. So yeah, I know I said a lot, but
how many countries have you been to so far?
I'm on 30. So, and that is over. Damn, I've been traveling since I was 16. So I took my first solo trip when I was 16. Just after my 16th birthday, I traveled from Jamaica to London by myself. My parents were bold, but that was, that kind of kicked everything off, and it's just been in my DNA.
So if anyone out there likes traveling tips, traveling ideas, and just wants to hear the stories of, a young solo traveler, I would definitely recommend your page, because you do have a lot going on. Where did you get back from most recently?
I was in Turkey. A lot of people are like, why are you in Turkey? I will say, of all the countries I've visited outside of Jamaica, Turkey is my favorite. It's my favorite place. I So I've been to other countries in Europe. I've been to Italy, and I will speak about how I get these really cheap flights another time. But I've been to other countries, and I've never actually been to a country where I was actually almost in tears when I was leaving. It was so good. And I think I saw a lot of connection with Jamaica in a very unconventional way, like seeing people like in their communities cooking on a coal pot. Like that just brings me to my grandmother's home, my parents, we still have one. So I saw that connection, and I'm also I'm like a biblical junkie. I love pilgrimage. I like looking for things that I grew up reading in the Bible. Turkey has a very, 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 very rich history as far as Roman persecution, Antioch in the book of Paul. So I look for things like that when I travel, and that place, there's nothing, like, you will not run out of things to see.
What did you see? Biblical related stuff you saw?
So there, when you go to, so Cappadocia or Cappadocia, that is, so you get to Istanbul. It's a 10-hour flight. And you fly from Istanbul. The flights within Turkey are like $20, or super cheap, the lowest prices, and you fly to Cappadocia. That is one stop that I went. In Cappadocia, a lot of people go for the balloons. That's great. You fly the balloons, it's fine. But then there's these hikes that you can go on. And there are, so the terrain of Cappadocia is pretty much caves. People actually live in the caves, but some of the caves are so well preserved by the tourist board, they actually show some old churches. So there were churches that were like 1490 something BC. It showed like the Christian pilgrimage through the area, and a lot of these areas were actually training sites for priests. So when you go into these churches that they built in the caves, you still see the fresco painting. You still see the images of Jesus painted on there. You still see like the nativity scene. You'll also see like where they ate, and they actually have the tables that they carved out of rocks, and chairs that they carved out of rocks. And most of these are like are churches that people would travel from afar just to come and hear the teachings, right? So you see those things still preserved. And then there are different areas in Turkey. There's this area called Antioch, which I didn't get to go, but that is like a very, Antioch has like a very significant role in the beginning of the church.
The early church, yes.
Yes.
Many letters were written to
yes.
the church in Antioch, for sure.
Yes. So thinking about that, a lot of people don't recognize that Turkey is actually where, a lot of it was like the Christian hub, as you would say back in the day. Mm-hmm. So if you are if you grew up on the Bible and you're really interested in just taking a pilgrimage, and I got this from my aunt. She passed away, and she traveled to Jerusalem, and she went to all of these places on her tours. But it was very important for me to like take that same path that she did, because she went to Turkey and she went to these places, and there was tons of ruins. And also I had a friend who was Muslim, so Turkey has significance with Rumi, and she was able to go and see, the structures and where he was buried. So it's a very spiritual country. It's still Muslim, 90% Muslim, but they still respectfully preserve a lot of the Christian heritage. And the food is amazing. And it was just a really good trip. It's a really good trip. And so now I'm just kind of like helping people. Like a lot of people want to go now. They're like, we have to go to Turkey because we've never even thought about it. But yeah, it's definitely something that, and the thing is, it's right next to Greece. So a lot of people want to go to Greece. I'm like, you guys can hop over. It's just, the island is literally just there. So, if it's a family trip, you could definitely go and do like a week or two and do Greece and Turkey and do your hikes to these places that have spiritual significance.
The one place that I really want to go to is Egypt.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's on my list. Although I will go, because I hate like listening to what people say and not go somewhere. But I hate like the commercialization of the pyramids. Like there's so much activity out there. I'm like, I thought this place was like out in the middle of nowhere and I could just walk. It's right in the city. So yeah, I'll definitely want to go. But I definitely want my next trip to be to the continent of Africa. I love Europe, but I have not been to Africa. And I feel like when I start my journey in Africa, I'm going to be like, bye to the Western world. So, there's so much to see. And that's why I want to inspire people to should just go travel and see, because our our ancestors didn't have this opportunity to see the world the way we can. So, we kind of owe it to ourselves to push ourselves to do these things. So that's why I want people to understand.
Right. So you travel, you encourage people of color to travel as much as you can, go as far as you can, get creative with it, get yourself out there, think out of the box. Don't think it's too expensive. Just find a way, do whatever you can, make it happen.
Yeah. I had a post the other day where I was telling somebody like, people would make the comment like, obviously, if you're traveling to these places, you're rich. And I'm like, no, my car is almost 10 years old. It's priority, like, and that's what I want to show people. Like, if you want to buy a ticket or to go somewhere, it might mean you're not ordering on Amazon every week, or you aren't buying the newest iPhone, or you don't need the newest car on the lot, or it just what you prioritize. And if you really want to go somewhere, there are different ways you can make money for that bank, travel bank. So I encourage everybody to have a travel bank account where you don't transfer no money out of until it's time. And if it's 2 years out, if it's 3 years out, you plan a nice trip, your family, yourself, and just see the world.
Charmaine, we're going to take a brief break. We'll be right back.
Sure.